I think
Sure.
the lack of desire.
And that's what in a way, that's what's to get at.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you mean by that? So, like, flesh out the frustration more, and then also, but what does it mean as a believer to then see it and have hope? I mean, that's a big part of what I think we'd want to engage with.
Yeah, I think when I watch it, like, I guess, like, those moderators, right? And I'll try to be extremely charitable in one sense, and then in another sense, I'm not going to be. They
Just
either
don't be explicit.
Yeah. They either have totally sold themselves for profit and power and position, right? Because this is what they've been told to do, and this is what they're going to do in order to rise up in the ranks at the forsaking of truth, right? Truth no longer matters. Or they have totally and utterly been brainwashed and bought into these lies on a level that is just mind-blowing, that you can go through this process and actually be that brainwashed. Now, we've seen this type of brainwashing is possible throughout human history, right? There is the potential for this. And I think it's a little bit of both, right? I'm not going to lie. I think both of those things, but it brainwashes people into an evil. And what I mean by an evil is no longer desiring to know truth. Like you no longer desire to get at the truth. You simply desire to present your positions and what you want, and truth doesn't matter. And that is literally what I watch those moderators. That's all I could think about is, like, there's zero desire to get after the truth tonight. Like, no one cares about the truth in this room in terms of those people are ABC and all of that. Like, they just don't. And that was, to me, the thing that frustrated me the most. Is like, whether Trump wins, loses, like Democrat, Republican, right? I mean, truth has to matter for a society to move forward. And we truly live in a society now where truth doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's the state of our society that is most concerning here overall. And Trump speaks of a nation in decline, and whatever exactly he means by that, I mean, and I would agree with most of those things, but yet underlying it, and he may not appreciate as fully that,
for sure,
is this truth and these spiritual realities. We believe that it's ultimately a spiritual condition, a spiritual death. I mean, if I'm going to process even what you said just now through the lens of the Bible, and I consider Romans 1, and it says that we not only do we like forsake truth, we don't care about, we actively suppress the truth. We exchange the truth for a lie. And so we eagerly pursue the lie, actually, because it helps justify us in our unrighteousness. Yeah. So we suppress the truth in our unrighteousness actively in a mass corporate at a mass corporate level through the media. Sure. And obviously there are those who are pursuing their power through that and see and have their self-interest in perpetuating, whether we're talking about an individual, a moderator, a news anchor who can, go through this day in and day out. They may be more consciously corrupted, or they're just so culturally corrupted. And even underneath that is the spiritual corruption. Again, I would go to 2 Corinthians. The God of this world has blinded the minds of unbelievers in such a way, yes, they can't, in a Christian way, see the glory of God in the face of Christ, but they can't discern any of God's truths. They're spiritually discern these ultimate realities that need to govern our lives.
Well, how do you even begin to start talking about the definition of God if you've already erased the objectiveness, the point of reference, right? So if you believe there is no point of reference, right? There is nothing objective about reality. Everything is relative. Everything is individualized. Everything. That's just the world we live in, right? It's relativity, right? You have your truth. I have my truth. Like, what is even a debate, right?
Well, then it becomes subjective about our experiences and
what are we
our
debating?
truth, and then that leads to one of the critiques that you brought up earlier in conversation about just the nature of, and I think what we're drawn into and what is powerful it has a powerful rhetorical effect on us to be drawn in by that emotion, by that storytelling. But is that the standard by which we ought to be evaluating these most important of issues?
Well, and I think too, like a lot of people, so you might be out there going like, what are you talking about? What do you mean the moderators? What did they do wrong? Right. So maybe that's you.
Oh, they don't know yet. Talking about that debate.
Yeah. Maybe that's you. But like what I'm pointing to is just some very specific things. Number one, the loaded questions, which we can talk about that. Like especially those last three, I was like, "What is this?"
How
like,
to get it in there.
Are we serious? Are you just shoving those in at the end? The follow-ups, right? The way in which they press Trump on some things, like posing the question on Ukraine in such a way of all America just wants to know, do you hope Ukraine wins the war? It's like, no American doesn't want to know. And he's like, no, I want us to get out of war. Like, I want the war to end. But who are you for? Are you for Ukraine? Well, I want the war to end.
I want the people to stop dying.
But we need you to say, because we know you will, that you hate Ukraine and you love Putin. Would you please say that? Right? And it's like they're just pressing him. And it's like, he's like, no, I just don't want, millions of people to die. We don't care about that. We want you to say what we want you to say. Would you please say it? All right. And so it's like that kind of follow up. We're over here with Kamala. You had Trump going, well, why don't you ask her that question? It's like, no, we're not going to do that. Right? There's no follow up over here. Like you're not going to press her on anything. That was a really big thing for me.
Yeah, let's set her up to say the most inflammatory, controversial, gaslighting, false narrative against Trump, and then not let him have a chance.
Yeah, and then his mic, and then finally the fact checking. Like they on live were ready to fact check everything Trump said, and then Trump's having to fact check Kamala. Yeah. Right? It's like, and you're just watching this play out. And by the way, they fact checked him wrongly many times, but. Just those three things. Like, if you can watch that debate and not see that at this point, then I'm not being rude, but you are Romans 1. Like, you are in that category. Like, if I don't care who you're for, if you can watch that and not recognize that, wow, like this was a 3-on-1. They had an agenda. They came at this man, and they were going to get what they wanted. They had no desire to talk about the truth of these things. They had no desire to dig deeper into it. Like, that was not their goal. Like, their goal was not to say, all right. I mean, many times, even with Kamala, did you notice how they would pose the question? They would go, Biden did this, but would you do anything different than Biden? Like, that's your scapegoat right there, right? Like, we know you're in the vice president, but here's your opportunity to disagree with Biden. And she couldn't even catch on. She was like, no, I fully support Biden and the way he pulled out of Afghanistan. It's like, we're trying to tee it up for you. What are you doing? Say, it's like she probably didn't even look at that. She didn't even know.
What about somebody who then would say, though, that you're just noticing all these things, you're seeing this because you already have your
my bias,
sure. And really, if you try to watch it objectively, Kamala did pretty good. I mean, she handled herself well, and she responded. She seemed to have emphasize a plan and a future, and want to draw people together in unity, and had a really positive message and these kind of things that were alluring. And obviously, they're provocative, or they have this way of engaging something in us, which makes it attractive to some.
Sure.
But of course, we would not fall for it or believe it, but just.
So I think there's two things you could say there. Number one, I would say ABC. Go back to the CNN debate. I thought CNN, they're on the same side. They're both leftists. I don't like CNN any more than I like ABC. But I thought CNN was relatively fair in the first debate with Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Right? It was they handled it
Seemed
well.
like it
right?
at times, yeah.
Right.
I
Now-
mean, more than I expected,
Yeah,
considering CNN,
100%.
considering Jake Tapper.
Now, would I say that underneath all that was they already had the plan to escort Biden out and get him out of the
course.
presidential race? Yes. So they had their agenda there too, right? Like, we don't want to make this man look good because we have a plan in the DNC to get him out and to uphold democracy and pull somebody in that got no votes last time and just replace him, like, without anybody voting on it.
And to just observe that and comment it briefly in passing, to contrast the two debates and in our reactions to them, each time the media has been obviously very instrumental in setting up the context, the narrative context in which everything is taking place. And so when Joe Biden is going to debate, though, at that point they have been silent about how far gone he is. And so, I mean, of course people knew, but yet then they were able to play the shock.
That's right.
And a lot of people probably were genuinely surprised, I guess, at the condition of Joe Biden. And then going into this one, we know we don't expect Kamala Harris to do very well. We're hoping and anticipating she's going to get set up to, take the fall that Joe did. And then, she definitely performs much better in a debate. And I would emphasize the word performs.
She performs better if you're uninformed.
Right.
That's the only way.
And that's what I'm trying to get at, because on the surface,
yeah.
It kind of does seem like, and I think the temptation is to just get caught up on the surface level interaction and the talking points, and many people do operate with these things on that level. So how do we see through that?
And that's my fear, right? My fear is a couple things, but I think one of the questions probably presses into what you're saying more than any other question, and that was the foreign policy question. The fact that Kamala could come out and say that when Donald Trump was in office, the world saw us as weak and he had bad foreign policy. No matter what you want to say about Donald Trump, I don't care if you hate him or love him, he had better foreign policy than any president maybe in the history of America. Right?
That totally assumes your worldview and starting point, because if you have kind of a neocon
sure.
And not even to that extreme, kind of the old era Republican, even without being the war
but I'm
hawk.
talking to the common American, right? We're talking about America, which I believe doesn't want war, right? We want peace in the world.
Sure.
I mean, he went into the Middle East.
But you could get quotes from world leaders criticizing Trump and not, disliking Trump. And you can make the case that, Trump has disrupted all of our conventional relationships.
But
and our
I think what Trump brought up when that happened, right? He did bring up the right point. Sure, a lot of these world leaders are going to hate me. I made them pay. Right? I made them actually come to the table and front their bills instead of us just paying for everything that we did in the world. And they hate me. Why would they not? And why would Putin not support Kamala like he did a few weeks ago? Weakness, right? He's like, man, we need these people to continue to be in office, right? And it's like, if you look in the world, and I guess that's what I'm saying, like being uninformed. If you just are paying attention, right? I mean, he walked into the Middle East and talked to the leader of the Taliban and said, hey, no more. Like, you're not shooting our troops anymore. And if you do, you've had a bad day. It ended. We had no more deaths of troops by snipers after that was over, right? Yeah. How can you say that's bad? I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. How is that a bad thing that they stopped shooting our troops, right? Well, and so all I'm saying is, objectively speaking, you had Putin was not in the Ukraine. Right? And I thought he did an excellent job going, she went over there to talk to him, and 3 days later he invaded, right? Like, is that strength, right? And it's like, no wars. The Middle East, which everyone thought was bogus when he was saying, I'm going to help the Middle East. I'm going to stop wars in the Middle East. Everybody's like, no, you're not. That's impossible. He does it, right? He starts making the whole world front bills, right? We're not paying for everything now. He puts tariffs on China, which is collecting billions of dollars. And by the way, the fact that they didn't make Kamala answer that question again drove me crazy. Like, why'd you keep the tariffs? And Kamala would keep going, you know what, I'm going to come back to that, but I want to respond here later. And she never came back to it, not one time the whole debate. Right? And
Trump does that
he
constantly.
does, but I'm just saying she would keep saying that. I'm going to come right back to that, but I'm going to talk.
Sure.
You know, but there were certain times where they would never get, and I'll be honest with you, I was frustrated with Trump on that because I would have went, no, I need you to answer that. Why did you not drop the tariffs? If they're bad, why didn't you get rid of them? Why, I wish he would have even pressed her more. But my point is, like, the foreign policy question was the dumbest one to try to attack Trump on. And anyone with an ounce of, like, just an ounce of being informed knows
with
that.
The military, like, continuing to try to make him seem like the enemy of the military and all these things. That's absurd.
So I guess what I'm saying there, what bothers me, right? There is that she actually thinks that she can say these things, and she believes that the American people are not going to know the difference.
Yeah.
That's the number one thing that's kind of scares me. The number two thing is her whole debate was just emotional heartstring pulling. Like, it was it was selling a story that has nothing to do with reality in the last 3.5 years, nor her whole career. It was just storytelling, right? But it had nothing to do with anything in reality. But again, she thinks this is going to work. Will it? I don't know. But if it does, we're in a lot of trouble because nothing was grounded in reality that she was saying. I think that would be like my biggest thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, just in that, there's so much, so many little threads to pull at, but it gets at the underlying. We want to talk foreign policy in our worldviews, influence on that policy. Then we're saying there is a standard of truth about what ought to be taking place here. And again, we're proposing two different systems, or underlying is assumed two different kind of world systems, global systems, and directions we could take the world in. And so under that is the assumption that those two directions are good. And so but they're going different directions in fundamental ways, and whatever label you want to put on it, with like the socialism, communism, kind of an economic paradigm, or globalism and these kind of things, or just underneath of it, this humanistic effort to try to attain to our own collective wisdom and our own definition of what's true. Or, submitting ourselves to what God says. And I'm not saying that Trump then perfectly does that, but there is a truth in which we would want to get at and hold that forward as the authority. And then on those grounds say, no, this is what we ought to submit to. This is what we ought to conform ourselves to. And along the line, a notion of the truth. And to get at that, and Trump's making his claim about what that is, and that's up for us to test out and everything. But to say that we don't have the right to do that, and then that's necessarily going to make people mad along the way. So what then I'm getting at is then being able to cite, this world leader over here, Germany, France, all of our historic allies, Trump has put us at odds with. Well, what kind of worldview are they putting forward, and how does the United States interests fit into that? That's a basic argument that Trump's making. It's a reasonable argument, and yet, and what are the interests of these other nations? Their national sovereignty, their ability to operate their own economies in their interest, so we want to align ourselves. So we're fighting for notions of truth and in relation to all these big categories, and it's going to make people mad who don't agree with that. So those people are going to be your enemies, and people don't like getting enemies, but if we're going to, but then the next thing though that I would flow into is, if we're at odds with each other, and we're, in the need to like sell a people, though, have salesmanship, then you got to make your case. But if your case is a bogus one, actually, then you're gonna make it seem good on the outside, even though your product is poor. It's a bad
Garbage.
product.
It's garbage.
It will lead to, it's a poison pill, actually.
Yeah.
As we start peeling back the layers, and that's what I'd say. At first, you might assume a degree of innocency, or if you give people the benefit of the doubt. But when you press for, and which may reflect, a big portion of the population or people that are in the, more liberal demographic and whatnot. But when you get to these people who are leaders, and Kamala Harris being able to stand up there and say the things that she does, knowing the things that she surely knows from her experiences, then we can only conclude that she is lying her face off.
Yeah.
And that she believes that necessary, and whether she believes it'll work, that's her hope. This is their tactic, and this represents the whole of the party, whether you agree with it or not. It reminds me very much of Barack Obama. And then when you can't rely on the truth, you start appealing to those personal anecdotes and ways to pull on people's heartstrings, and that not only exposes a weakness to the content of she kept talking about a plan. I got a plan. She never actually talked about a plan.
Yeah.
She just talked about a plan and being positive.
Well, it's like Trump said that one time, and I thought it was a good comeback. He's like, okay, let's stop right now, and let's go back to D.C., and let's go do these things right now. And what he was pointing at was like, you've had 3.5 years, right? We can talk about what you're, I'm going to give $50,000 to new business startups and $26,000 to buy a house and do it. Why have you not done it, right? He kept saying, and for me, it's like, even the thought process of like, she's like, well, he don't have a plan on the economy. No, he has a history on the economy for 4 straight years and did an amazing job. I'm a small business owner. Like, my life underneath a Trump presidency was 10x better than a Biden presidency, right? And it's like, so I don't even know why we're talking about like this future idea of what both candidates can do. We know what both candidates can do. We have a history. That's why the black people aren't buying into all this nonsense. Like, the black community's like, bro, listen, I don't care what you say. I have more money in my pocket when Trump was in president than what I got in my pocket right now. And it is that simple. And it's not just black community, it's everybody. I've just been watching a lot of like Trump for black or blacks for Trump videos lately. But people aren't buying into it because reality is hit, right? We can't talk out here anymore when it's like, no, reality, I don't have as much money. My dollar doesn't go as far, right? And that matters to people. But I think another question that was posed that Christians, this is about, and I don't want to say this is the best Christians can hope for, but this is what Christians should hope for. When they kept trying to say, Trump, you want to do a national abortion ban, right? And he's like, no, I never said that. Like, you're lying, she's lying, but all of you are lying. I never said that, right? God, the bloodbath one when they were trying to make it sound like he said it would be a bloodbath in the street over the election. He's like, no, that's not what I said, but whatever. But sorry, I'm going to squirrel. That just hit my head. But I want you to notice something. Trump said, what we did with Roe versus Wade was we gave it back to the people. We gave it back to the people. And that is quite literally what America was built upon. That is the best you can hope for in any nation, is that it is given back to the people to vote on. What Kamala wants is she wants to take, and this is not just her, it's all Democrats. They want to take a small majority or maybe even a little larger majority of people, and they want to force it down the throat of everyone else from a national level. Now, they'll do it by pulling on your heartstrings in however way they want to in this deceptive way, but you need to see the difference between the two. What Trump is saying, hey, in Georgia, if they decide to do a ban on abortion, that's Georgia. Right? They get to vote on that. And if you don't like it, you get to move to New York. You get to move to wherever that does want it. Right? And that's the beauty of this nation, is that if you don't like the way things are going, if it's states' rights, move to the other state. But in a system like the Democrats want, it's going to be force-fed to you, and there's nowhere to go. You're going to eat it, and you're going to like it, and they don't give a what you think. Right? And that's their worldview. Right? So they can talk however they want to with all this fluffiness and all this deceptive language, but they are going to force you to do what they want you to do, whether you like it or not. And that's not what we want, right? What we want is what Trump, no, I give it back to the states. I gave it back to the people. Let the people do that. And he said this a number of times. They said, but what about you? And I love, this was one of my favorite things that he went. He goes, it doesn't matter what I think. Like, that's what y'all are missing. Like, it doesn't matter what I think. I gave it back to the states. Y'all are trying to make this about me. It's not about me. It's the states now. It's out of my hands. It doesn't matter. And that's what we want. And we want the federal government dead in these matters and the states voting on these matters.
Well, and I mean, it definitely, there's a political ideologies, that influence how to govern these matters and whatnot. And this is the times we're in, and it is what it is. I personally wouldn't be opposed to a national abortion ban, but yet I'm not in that position. And if I were, is it expedient in the time and place that you're in to like passionately advocate that? While I would affirm that it would be a good thing and right according to God, I would support it. But
what kind of
overall,
precedent are you setting, though? Right. So the next person that comes in is a national. You must have abortion or whatever, right? So you're setting precedent.
The standard, and that's ultimately what then I would appeal to, and rather than it have to come from the top-down government, it ought to come from the top-down God. And God says, thou shalt not murder. He also says that every human being is created in the image of God. And unfortunately, that's where, Trump can underperform, I think, in response to certain questions. There's such opportunity in those moments
but he's not there.
To be teed up to respond in a way that could demolish the argument she's trying to make, because just at the tail end of that, he could have some classic moment where she's appealing to the condition of the woman and how could you infringe upon her rights, and to acknowledge the life of the child in that moment. Just mic drop. Truth bomb on the heart. And to say that from that kind of platform, even if you weren't then going to pursue a national abortion ban, you could say that. That's powerful. And those are missed moments. And that's sad, because really, if when you don't want people to die, if you don't want the Ukrainians and Russians to die, then what about all the more that are dying in the womb every year? And to not acknowledge that, it's overall part of the evil way in which our culture deals with these issues and doesn't talk about them. And that's what what does Kamala Harris and people like that, what do they really think about their constituents when they can sit up there and attempt to lie in such a fashion and manipulate people? There's an evil at work, an underlying evil that is present in us all, but it is being given over more to in those who would try to then lead us in that direction. You could see in Trump maybe his own internal battles, his shortcomings in processing all these as successful and admirable as he might be in certain spheres of knowledge and experience, but yet in other ways is deficient. And we would need and hope and pray for a leader who could be so well-rounded, and that's what you hope a team would be. So you're really voting for an administration in the overall kind of complex of worldviews, a synthesis, and we as Christians don't often like synthesizing our worldview with other worldviews, but to be able to have this coalition of people who can come under a big tent and unite together sometimes means we de-emphasize certain issues that can be more divisive, inflammatory. And so I would say you got to see Trump's effort as a politician and is really being pretty masterful in that regard. And it may leave you wanting, it may leave you grieved as a Christian for the lack of strong conviction and response, but yet overall, surely you could see the direction that his administration would take us.
Well, I think two things can be true on this point, right? If that's the case, the RFK alliance should have left you grieved, right?
Sure, and those things did by some. The most
Right.
you know,
Right.
conservative.
And so this is what, I guess this is what I'm getting at, right? You have to be able, and this is why I love Kingdom Come. This is why I love the name, our approach to things. Like, these things are important. You have to be able to balance between understanding what a nation needs in a leader and where alliances need to be formed, but also understand that these alliances, although we're coming together to fight back against a greater evil, we have to come back to these things. Like, we are not saying we will give up this ground to be able to be aligned to move forward. And I see this happening in, I'll just give you an example. I watched Tucker Carlson and Glenn Beck's interview the other day, and I love both those men in a lot of ways, but I greatly disagree with both those men in a lot of ways, right? He was talking about gays against grooming, gays against grooming, right? And he was talking about how, there was this conservative Christian woman that had got up and talked before him and was like, bye, 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 bye. He got up after her and was like, no, like, I love gays against grooming because they're fighting back against pedophilia, right? And on one sense, I go, yes. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Glenn. Yes, but we have to be very careful that we don't go, because it's got so evil, we're all aligning in these other areas to tramp out the worst evils. So when we have the pullback, we find ourselves in this place where it's like, whoa, hold up now. Like, we can't go, but these things are okay. And I don't think Glenn's saying that, right? But I'm throwing the warning up, right? Like, there's a sense of we come and ally together to stop out this communist movement that's quite literally trying to take over the world with a one world order, and they are throughout the Western world. And we do come together to stop that. But we're not saying that when we come together, when we do stop it, if God so sees, in his mercy that we can, that we come back and we just go, okay, this is the new way things are. No. We have to hold fast to these things from God, because that is of most importance, right? And I think we have to understand that. I don't know if that's making sense,
yeah,
right?
Sure. There is a beauty in the ability. I think that God's ultimate purposes are in accomplishing a form of that, because that's true in the church.
Sure.
There's all kinds of diversity that is at least, that acknowledges at the same time our fallenness, our inability to attain to all of the highest truths in their perfect form in unison together, but yet we can be so united in our differences that we can come together and operate under a common truths for a common mission.
Let's stop this, and then we're going to come back and talk about this once we stop it. Because am I for anybody that's against grooming little children? Yeah, we're on the same team, right? If you're against grooming children for pedophilia, you're on my team.
As far as that issue,
right? But when we pull back, all right, now we got to have this conversation around marriage again, because we're divided here, right? We're divided here. And I think what was Trump? Trump kept pushing into something about it was, again, the Roe versus Wade, right? And he's right. We have been divided on this issue for 52 years. It has ripped our country apart, and all we have done is give it back to the states so that can be dealt with. I'm the same way with marriage, by the way, right? We have been divided over gay, straight marriage for so long. And what I want to say is the state shouldn't be involved in marriage at all. That is the problem for me, is that the state's even involved in it all. You want to get rid of all the problems we have in gay and straight, just get rid of the state, get the state out of it, right? And then if you want to go over here as a homosexual couple and you want to say, I'm getting married, I can go, okay, that's fine. It's not marriage, but do what you want to do, right? Like, that's not marriage. That's a redefinition of something you just want to call marriage, because marriage is God's, it's not government's, right? But whatever, do whatever you want to do.
And that speaks to the complications of reality.
Well, they want to tax it, right? They want to make money off of it.
All these things.
That's why they do it. But my point is, we could get rid of all the turmoil immediately if the state would just get out of it, right? And just go, hey, the marriage
makes it more inflammatory.
It does.
And divisive.
It does.
Which is ironic, I mean, in this illustration, to me, exposes their tactics, and again, like ought to clue a person into how much they hate you. And the question set up against Trump, but it was just so vague in general. But and I forgot exactly how it went, but it was on race and discrimination and this kind of thing. And it's like we live.
Why are you asking this
we
question?
live in such these divisive and racially charged times. Trump, do you feel responsible for that?
Well, he was
And
talking
then-
about her race. He called her, "Is she really black?"
Right,
Remember, it was like, you
right,
said
right.
she's not really black.
Yeah, no, that perfectly makes the point. And they're saying, and then her response is, can't we just stop making everything about race? When he had just said, I don't care what race she is. I'm just responding that she, and here's what they did. They made her identity, again, that's why Trump could, in the moment, it's easy to armchair quarterback, but, in the moment, he could point out how they make everything about identity in your race.
Yeah.
She identified herself in these ways for political advantage along the way, which exposed her tendency to flip-flop and say whatever's necessary and be, a political chameleon. And she's taken total advantage of that, like so many others. So they are and it has characterized this modern left and Obama's administration, especially, to make everything about race. And then they do that. Then with Trump, they make everything about race, and then they shame him. How dare you for being so racist and making everything about race? Can we not move forward and not make everything about race anymore?
I think,
they brought up, the moderators brought up, they're the ones that bring up race in the moment so that then Kamala could shame Trump and take this moral high ground.
Dude. And I think he caught him off guard with his answer too, because he was just like, yeah, I don't care what she is. I don't care what her race is. And they were like, yeah, but you said, he's like, yeah, because I read one day where she said she was this, and then I read the next time where she said she
Just
was this.
point
And
out.
so I'm just showing that's what she said. I'm just reading it, and I don't care what color she. And they were like, okay, Kamala, go do something.
But
They didn't know what to do with it.
in that you see also, like, whether she had the questions exactly ahead of time, there's these established talking points that are so fundamental
Did she
to
have
everything.
the questions ahead of time?
I mean, I don't know, but that's what I'm saying.
No.
What I'm saying is it literally
Okay,
does
time out.
not
I'm going to
matter.
rephrase it. Odds are, did she have the questions?
Yeah, high probability, but I'm just saying it doesn't really matter. It's a political debate.
Yeah.
You know they're going to ask certain ones, and you know what the narrative is that defines the talking points. So you know when the general subject comes up, how you're going to come at it, and that's what it's about for them. That's what and that's what I'm trying to get at in all this is their ability to establish and spin a narrative, and they're so desperate to have established that with Kamala here. They hid her, and then they debuted her here in this, and now they're trying to spin it positively for that, in that direction, as well as and their strategy of trying to frustrate Trump along the way through all. Because you say, how could they possibly use all of these lies that have been debunked and continue to try and gaslight the population into believing these things? It could, and it should, and hopefully it all will really backfire on them and expose these things. But yet, for a percentage of the population who they're counting on, as well as the media, their use of the media.
They're counting on you to be uninformed. They're counting on you to have no idea and to be stupid. They literally are counting on you to be stupid.
And to be caught up with these emotions and these things.
But I'm going to tell you this. One thing I'm going to say about Trump, a lot of people are like, man, he could have did this, he could have did that. And I agree. There's some things he could have did different. But I'm going to tell you this about it. One thing he did last night, you have to take the context of the moment into consideration too. He walked in. I can't imagine sitting up there after everything that's happened to me. I mean, I love the fact where he was like, well, I did take a bullet. You remember that time I took the bullet? But I can't imagine everything that's happened to you in your past, having to deal with day in and day out with the absolute assault on you and your family. You walk into this room with two just,
Don't do it.
yeah, I don't do it. With these two little moderators here that are just absolutely just who they are, and that's all I'm going to say. and you're literally listening to these questions that are like softballing to her, and they're lying about you, and you took a bullet like 5 weeks ago, right? And you're just listening to the lie after lie after lie, and just the face, the smugness of these two moderators, and then like oh, well, Mr. Trump, right here, this on page 72, it does say they weren't eating dogs in Springfield. That's not been confirmed yet, right? Right, and like just the smugness of that, which I would have just been like, hey, you know what, buddy? Just come up here real quick. Just real quick. Just come up here. Like, let's just me and you man-to-man deal with this. Like, let's just deal with it real quick. Like, I mean, I just wanted to lay him out many, many times over, right? And I'm just watching that, and I'm like, I'm actually, because there was a few times Kamala I could tell was getting underneath the skin, right? And like I was like, don't do it, man. Don't. It's a setup.
Yeah,
this
sure.
whole thing's a setup.
And he knew that.
And they're trying to get you to do what they want you to do so they can point at you for the next month of look. I think that's why Kamala asked for another debate immediately, right? They were kind of like, dang, we didn't get him. We didn't get him where we wanted to get him to. Like, we need to get him to do some things that we want him to do. And what I'm saying is he did a great job at pulling that back, right?
Yeah,
he would
sure.
get that right there, and you could tell, like, and he was like, nope. Pull it back, right? And he did a good job at pulling it. Because I don't know that I would have pulled it back. Like, there was a few times, like, I would have just, like, I'm telling you.
Sure.
Like, if I caught that guy in an alley afterwards, like, it'd be a bad day.
But, I mean, that demonstrates a maturity.
It does. He's come a long way.
Diplomacy. But I would say he's exhibited that all along the way. 8. Are we at 8 years?
But they were looking for the second debate with Biden, right? They were looking to encourage him to go off. That's why they turned the mics on. That's why they left the mics on. Like, their tactic was to go in there and get him to blow up and to talk up. And I loved how he got her back there. He's like, hey, hold up, I'm talking. Right? So he got her before, and that's what they wanted to do to him the whole night. They were hoping he would talk over her the whole night. And he sat there, and he took it, and he took it, and he took it. And I don't think we all understand how hard, I know we don't all understand how hard that could be with everything he's been through. And then these little smug moderators doing that kind of stuff. Like, man, that's another level of self-control that I feel like he demonstrated last night. And I'm going to say that. Well, like, another level of it.
And and this is your point, but in the face of the absolute wickedness of the lies and the performance that's being put on there, in his peripheral vision, and having to endure that, and to stay composed is admirable. And not only that, but then to fight the battle that he did on that level, with words, in a debate, on ideas, and to highlight, with the opportunity he had, these little nuggets of truth to point us in that direction, to wage that battle of truth. He did that 3-on-1. Basically, he took them on, as well as now the whole media establishment, which has been the case the whole time, And so, again, if you can't see that and you will buy into how they spin it, then, of course, that is judgment upon that percentage of the population that would be. It is an indictment of your present condition. And unless you are to wake up from it and not become a Trump superfan necessarily, but at least be able to acknowledge that and see below the surface, acknowledge, the worldview, at least begin to wrestle with the worldview. And are you in alignment with that? Are you in agreement? Not what they say, the direction they want to take the world, but what they have demonstrated. Not what they say Trump is going to do, but what he's demonstrated. Look at the facts and actually determine where's this thing headed.
Yeah, like when Kamala opens up, I thought this is something, like you said, Monday morning quarterback, right? But I was just thinking when she opens up with, like, I'm the only small town middle class girl up on the stage that had to raise myself up by my bootstraps, and I know how to do this. I wasn't handed
give them
$400 million, right? And I would immediately have been like, and I'm the only one on the stage that's hated by all and was shot at and doesn't need any of this. Like, I don't need a paycheck, Kamala. I know you do. I don't need the paycheck. I'm up here, even though you're trying to kill me, and I'm still running for president, right? It's like, do you understand like what you're bringing? Like, come on, man! Like this is not the game you want to play. Now, again, he could have never have got that off because, I mean, it's man. I had a hard time last night, and I honestly was like, man, if I didn't have Jesus, if I was like a full-on political commentator, if I was like a full-on journalist, and I'm watching this, I would have lost myself. Like just the amount of wickedness, the amount of lies, the amount of deception that was happening, and just the absolute lack of any care in the world at getting at the truth that we find in ABC and these moderators. I was just like, y'all are either brainwashed so far that there's no return, or you're absolutely and utterly wicked, and it may be both. And you're willing to just destroy. Yeah, you're willing to destroy the country for a promotion, right? You don't care. Like you don't care about the truth. You only care about self promotion, and that's where we're at in this world. It's about, and that's where the left, this agenda, corporatism, they play on self promotion and our selfish desires to allure us in and lie to us, and we as sheep just walk into the slaughter, right? It's just like, oh yeah, oh that's you mean all that stuff? Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you so much. Like I need that. Like that's so great. I'm not going to worry about the last 3.5 years now because you're telling me right now you're going to do it all better. Right?
Yeah. I mean, that's my concern. Is not so much the moderators or whoever, but just people and their ability to see through these things. Of course, the direction of our nation.
They wouldn't do it if they didn't think it worked.
Right, and yeah, right. No, it is effective, surely, and it's nothing new. You know, it's this age-old thing. Yeah. And as Christians, to see it as part of the greater warfare that we're in, that's been underway, and that God would equip us to fight in, to be warriors, but according to His ways, His standards, and so, and of course, our heart being from the right posture, and being a heart of faith as well, not being discouraged in such times, but hopeful. So I was reflecting on these kind of things beforehand, in sort of a more pastoral way for a Christian, not just dealing with the current events so much, but the times and how they can weigh on us. And so there's the potential to have hatred toward the world and the forces in it, the particular characters there.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And but God ultimately, he tells us in His Word, 1 Timothy, to pray for all people, including those in high places, and who are in these positions of power and influence. And it is genuinely that they might be saved, but it's recognizing that that they have an influence in the world that they're in, and so we would hope that it be a godly one in principle, even if not in truth in that person, but might God work even in that person. There's hope for that. It would be powerful, but even if not in that person, again, that position and the role of it in our society, and for godly people to be raised up in it, or people that would be more inclined and conducive to our way, because it says there that we might live a more quiet and peaceful life, that we could, continue on in our regular ministry of the gospel and, our responsibilities and the joys of just living life in the world. But I would also say that, there's the temptation to feel so overwhelmed by it all. And by the apparent prospering of the wicked, maybe you do see these things for what they are, but and you wonder, is God going to work, or in what way? And we tie that hope to a certain success or prosperity in the moment, for the sake of our nation, for the sake of our families, and that's a valid desire, a valid prayer. But our ultimate hope must be set on God's ultimate plan and intentions, and the ultimate victory that we know that is sure in Christ. And so there's Psalm 37 had come to mind, and it's longer and it's worth reading and meditating on. But there's just a couple of verses here that I'd like to share. Maybe in closing us out,
Yeah.
but I don't want to, maybe just
No,
give you a
close it
chance.
out.
Okay.
No.
Well, the idea, based on the potential to be stirred up, to be emotional, rightly in our own way. It's right to have a righteous indignation toward evil in the world, but in your anger, do not sin. And so that's our problem.
And I think of it
That's
as
our
like,
trouble.
I'm going to throw this in there. I think of it as like Elijah with the Baal prophets, where he's sitting there, he's going, oh, no, yeah, yell louder. Yeah, y'all keep going loud. No, cut yourself. Maybe he'll listen if you cut yourself.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, no, do this, do that, right? He's mocking them.
Yeah.
He's making fun of them because he's going, no matter what you do, your God's not God. Yeah. Right? You cannot win.
He's doing
in
battle
the end. That's
with
right.
the sword of the Spirit.
That's right. And he's
the Word of God.
And he's mocking. He's mocking this worldview. He's mocking this behavior.
Ridiculing.
He's ridiculing it, going, this is stupid because it's not in alignment with the one true God.
Because it's false.
That's right.
Right.
And you know
It's
what?
false.
Soak my altar with water. Go ahead. Do whatever you feel like you need to do. God, bring it down. Fire. Incinerate it. Over. Go ahead, son.
Yeah, a trust that his God will come through in the end, and their God is really no God at all, no matter how powerful they may seem, and the power of Baal, in the moment. So this is Psalm 37, and I'll just pick up at verse 8. And it says, refrain from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not yourself. It tends only to evil. For the evildoers shall be cut off. But those who wait for the Lord shall inherit the land. In just a little while, the wicked will be no more. Though you look carefully at his place, he will not be there. But the meek shall inherit the land and delight themselves in abundant peace. The wicked plots against the righteous and gnashes his teeth at him. But the Lord laughs at the wicked, for he sees that his day is coming. So, that's powerful. That has to be the ultimate, truth that we keep our hearts and minds centered on. And that way, whatever happens, we can endure as a faithful believer in these promises. And that our vindication doesn't have to come through our efforts, especially those in this world. Obviously anything like taking up arms or physical or violent as far as fighting this battle, but yet even trusting in the weapons that God does give us to stand on truths and to be willing to give up our lives, literally to whether that means to just not be able to prosper in a wicked world. And being willing to take that reproach upon yourself.
Being willing to live outside of the economy of the wicked world.
Sure, I mean that's what it means here in our element.
I think that is something
that's
Christians are not ready to do.
Sure,
right.
It's a timeless pressure in reality. It's a temptation, and it's where our faith has to be built up and strong enough. And I think that's part of pastorally how we in the need to build people up and to see through this and to set your eyes more firmly on God's truth than what the world says.
And maybe we take that psalm and we take that point of being willing to live outside of a world economy that's evil and what that looks like, and we use that to usher in the next video, because I actually think that's an important conversation, right? What is
in
that?
Like practical ways.
In a practical way.
Or what to potentially anticipate and expect, and just to, in those ways, be ready.
Yeah,
Exactly.
How are we
people
to honor God and honor His Word and be ready and be prepared so that we are positioned in such a way to not only take care of our families, but also those around us, our neighbor, right? There's a way in which you're commanded to love your neighbor as yourself. You're commanded to do these things. So how do we position ourselves well to be able to do these things?
Yeah, why don't you pray for us?
Yeah.
With that heart of grace, and just looking forward.
So not
to
like
these
David's prayer. God, smoke my enemy. Not yet. All right, Father God, thank you so much. Thank you for this time that we have together. Thank you for the desires and the passions that you have put upon our heart. Thank you for the people that are listening in, God. I just pray, God, that you would give us ears to hear and eyes to see and a heart to believe in the Word of God, that you would make us as the men of Issachar, that we would, as we press into your Word and we look at the times and the seasons that are around us, that we would be ready, that we would be watchful, that we would seek to understand, that we would be humble, so that if we misunderstand, that we can receive correction and redirect based upon the Word of God, that you would help us navigate these waters that can oftentimes be muddy, that can oftentimes stir up emotions in us that might be righteous emotions, but then we could act on them in unrighteous ways. I pray that we would trust you faithfully, that we would believe in you, that you are always at work in evil and in good, but that we would also be active because you've called us to take part in the things that you're doing in this world, and that you would give us the humility and the wisdom to navigate that. Like, how active are we called to be? And then when are we supposed to sit in prayer? When are we supposed to do? When are we supposed to sit? Right? That takes a maturity that I myself have not arrived at yet, and I know this, that I desire to arrive at, right? And I know we all have our tendencies. We all have our sin natures. Mine is to act too much. Others might be to sit too much, right? And then how do we come together in that? And how do we operate in that? And how do we bring in the kingdom of God in the world in which we live in right now? Right? Give us the wisdom to do that. Give us the eyes to see where we can be bringing in the kingdom of God right where we are. And I think oftentimes we get caught up in like a debate like this, and we look at this big national level, while right beside us in our workplace, someone needs to hear the gospel. And we're so caught up in the clouds that we miss everything that's going on right around us. And I pray that we don't become those people either, because the power of God, it does not come from a top down with a hammer, but it's from the bottom up. And it spreads like a wildfire when the people of God just do the things that God's called us to do. When we carry out the Great Commission, when we speak into these things with grace, with love and kindness, but with righteousness and truth and confidence, right? And we're not afraid. And we push back against things that are evil in the world, and we stand firm, and we're willing to take the consequence. We're willing to suffer. We're willing to do whatever it takes to stand on the truth. And I pray that becomes the people that we are. I pray that you'll be with our leaders. I pray, God, that you'll be with this nation, that we will see through the deception and the lies. I pray that we will elect the person that we believe will carry out the things that you desire for this world. We love you and we trust you. In Jesus' name, amen.